Hey everyone, Dave Durante here with Power Monkey Fitness, again with some more planche drills. You asked for them, so here they are in terms of some more advanced planche drills. This one is going to be building off of what we did in our previous drill with our rower, but now we're going to be adding a level of instability using a ball. We're using med balls here. If you only have a med ball, try to use the lightest one that you possibly can. Heavier ball will actually create a more stable base. We're looking for some instability here. If you have a physio ball, that's ideal, where it's going to allow you to make sure that core becomes more engaged and you're having to control more what's going on, rather than what we saw with the rower where it's fixed. Same idea in terms of movement pattern. The feet will be on the ball, body will be in that nice hollow body position, pulling those scapula away from each other, really trying to think about keeping the elbows nice and locked out. Fingertip position will be exactly what we talked about in the first video. In the second video, fingers out to the side, thumbs pointing at 12 o'clock, and leaning as far forward as you can with that same body position being maintained throughout. Let's work through a couple of reps here back and forth. Again, 3 to 5 second holds will go a long way. Try to stay away from any holds longer than 10 seconds. A cool little variation here that you can play around with too is working on a straddle planche. Again, feet together with one ball will mimic again that full planche position, but realistically as we build, a straddle planche will be something that will be in your arsenal before you get into that full planche. So this variation will require 2 balls, 2 physio balls, or 2 med balls. 2 physio balls is actually pretty tough, so I would actually start out with just doing 2 light med balls to get used to the positioning. 1 foot on each of the balls. Start with the ball right around your shin so that as you lean forward, it'll roll more towards the end of your foot and ankle. If you start with the balls on your ankles, on your feet, it's going to be really difficult to lean. You'll kind of just fall right off the ball. So start mid-shin so you can have a little bit of room to rock back and forth. Positionally, everything stays the same as what we saw from the previous ball drill. Now this particular drill is one that we utilize in the gymnastics world endlessly, not specifically for the planche, but has a lot of application to the planche. It's used more in the world of the Maltese work, and a Maltese is basically a higher level variation of the planche, where instead of your shoulders being above the rings or the parallel bars, they are now in line with the rings or the parallel bars. This is a much higher level variation, but this particular drill sets us up with the shoulders in line with the hands, but again, it's going to be working the same muscle groups that we're going to be thinking about with the planche. First variation here is going to be in a tuck. Boxes, even if they're just wood boxes, can work out perfectly fine here, so don't worry about them being nice and hard. I think it'll work out fine. Starting in a deep tuck position, I want to see the hips come nice and high, starting in a position where you can actually feel stable. If you've never done this before, try to have a spotter just to make sure that you don't fall past vertical, but ideally your body will never be fully vertical, always a little bit short so you can come down if something goes a little wonky. From there, what we're going to try to do on this first variation is lower the body down to a point where we're nice and flat, hips in line with shoulders, and do a hold. 3, 5, maybe upwards of 10 seconds, but no pulling back to vertical, just bringing the feet down to the ground. Main focus is just hold. Deep into the tuck, keeping the knees as deep into the chest as possible. Elbows being locked out here as well, and wrap your fingers around the edges of the box so you have something actually to grab onto in the same way you would parallel bars or rings. Second variation here is going to be similar in terms of setup that we saw with the first tuck drill. Instead of holding, we're going to be doing tuck pulls. So we'll touch that bottom position. In fact, I'm totally fine if the hips drop slightly below horizontal, and then you'll pull back to that same starting point. Nice and slow, not too fast within these variations. Take your time, but the goal here will be to be able to touch that bottom position and then pull back slowly back to your start. The highest level variation that we're going to show within this particular sequence is going to be mimicking the straddle planche. So now instead of starting in a tuck, we'll extend fully to a straight body position, separate those legs into as wide of a straddle as you can possibly get to, and we're going to lower down all the way to the point where our legs are now touching our arms and our hands, and then pull back up to vertical. This variation is very challenging, so it's going to be a big jump from what we did on the tuck to a straight leg position. The straddle will kind of assist in terms of an intermediate step to that fully straight leg position, but it still will be pretty challenging. A couple things to consider. One, as you pull back up, no piking from the hips. This should be done by leading from your heels, keeping the body nice and open. Even a little arched is preferred from being piked. So when you're going through the position, think straight body, or even a little arched going through each of the reps. Last variation in our planche series here is going to be back on the parallettes again, back into that tuck position. But what we're going to do is play around with a few variations. We're going to go from our tuck support into our tuck planche and open into a nice straddle position before we pull back into the tuck. Couple things to consider here. What we're doing here is controlling the body into that nice extended planche position, but understanding not so much the strength. This is a more weight distribution drill, making sure that we understand the amount of lean that is necessary forward from the shoulders to be able to establish a good balance point when we go from a tuck to a straight leg position. It's going to be much more severe than what we see in the tuck, so be aware that this drill is particularly about weight distribution and not so much about strength. Each of the holds should only be about a couple of seconds, 1 to 2 seconds max, so don't think of this as a really long hold position. You can build into that. Main thought here is more about weight distribution rather than strength. Thanks everyone for following along. Hopefully you found some helpful tips in here. Let's see how those planche drills are coming along. Please like, follow, subscribe, and also send us those videos so we can see how you guys are progressing.